everybody, welcome to my first paint tutorial for Halo Flashpoint. Let's see how this turns out for us. So I'm working on the Spartan Zvezda. Um, I'm starting out with a dark gray and a middle gray. So this is Pro Acryl, this is their dark neutral and neutral gray. And I'm going to mix these together, a 1-to-1 ratio here for my base coat. I want a nice dark base on this guy. I've zenithal primed the model, but if you're new to this, zenithaling is not necessary. But these old eyes really appreciate the help on seeing where the detail is, and it does kind of give us a nice guideline on where our dark areas are. So we're going to take this darker gray mixture and we're going to base coat all of our essentially black areas on the model. Once we get through most of that, we're going to have a solid dark base on it. And if you go out of your lines, you know, it's not a big deal because we're going to go up now and mix in a little more of that neutral gray. We want to lighten our base tone down. I don't want to go to the full neutral quite yet. I'd like to keep them on the darker side. I'm thinking more of a black armor here. So I've mixed in another blob of the neutral gray, and we're going to go and hit the white areas from the zenithal prime, or just the areas that should be picking up more light on the model. Again, if you make mistakes, we're really early here. This is base coat, so it's not a big deal if you stay exactly in your lines. The intent going forward, shoulder pads and knee pads will be red to identify my red and blue teams. My blue team is going to be more of a traditional army green. We'll go ahead and get our base coat slathered on here, and then we'll start moving on. Sitting here thinking of things to say, I probably should have trimmed this down a bit. Alright, now I've moved along. We're finishing up getting our base in. We can see we've got the model almost two-toned. We've got that darker gray, then our slightly lighter gray in the highlighted areas, which we'll use some of our neutral gray to accentuate here later on. Key is we always want to push our lighter colors to the top of the model because that's where we're assuming the light is hitting them from. These are nice models for new painters to start on too. They're nice and big. The details are pretty pronounced. And they're pretty forgiving as you're getting your base layers on. I'm getting a little perfectionist in my painting here. It wasn't necessary because we are going to go back and we're going to hit a lot of these areas again. Alright, now we're going to jump up to the straight neutral gray. We're going to use this for our first highlight. We're going to go in and we're going to heavily get around the edges, the areas that are going to pick up the most light on the model, and just really pronounce where those details are on the model. Now some of you better versed in the stylings of the Zvezda armor are going to look at me and be like, why are you painting the visor so much? And I did not realize until after I had actually finished the model that I did not paint enough visor on this model, which we'll see later on when I get to that point. But I assure you, I have fixed that problem and the end result has the proper Zvezda styles visor painted on it. Alright, so we've got some basic highlights on this thing, so now we're going to jump over to our red. This is what I'm going to use to accent the shoulder pads and the knee pads on the armor. This is where you want to be a little more patient, a little more accurate with your paint application. Just make sure you're staying in your lines, for lack of better terms, and get a nice even coat on those areas. That looks sharp. Alright, now that done, we're going to move on and get our visor started here. I'm just giving our red a little time to dry before we go back and start playing with our highlights there. If you've got a finer point brush, it doesn't hurt to switch over at this point to it. I was using a number 2 at this point, which is what I used to paint the majority of the model. And with the Zvezda, in hindsight, the bigger brush isn't a big deal because the visor is much larger than I end up painting on this guy initially. I don't use a lot of metallics when I paint typically, but I really wanted these visors to look shiny and pop. So I'm using Army Painter, or I'm sorry, Pro Acryl Rich Gold for the base coat, and then they also have a light gold that I'll use for the highlight, which I'll finish off with a dab of silver. My preferred paint when I'm painting is Pro Acryl, but any range that you prefer is going to work. You just, if you're wanting to follow this scheme in particular, if you want to use comparable colors. I really made extra work on myself getting that visor done incorrectly. So I'm going to switch over to black while everything else is drying. Our visor and our pads, we'll go ahead and get the gun base coated, as well as the body glove on the armor. Now the body gloves, where we want to be a little more careful because we're going to be bumping into the armor plates. But remember, you still got all your grays on your palette, so even if you make a mistake, it's really easy to correct it at this stage. We'll use some magic editing dust here and move forward a little quicker than this actually took me. I think the entire model took, not counting drying time, just over an hour to paint. Here we can see I'm getting into where the bodysuit is not covered by the armor, just to accentuate those little spots. And that's some nice contrast. It breaks up the model for you, really shows off those armor plates. And like I said earlier, if you make a mistake and you bump up to your plate, hey, you still got all of that gray on your palette right there. Just give it a minute to dry up and go back and clean it up. As you can see here, I'm going back and doing just that. I got the fingers a little heavy with the black when I was painting the rifle, so I'm just going back in here and picking the fingers out. Thin paint, nice tip on the brush, nice and slow. Really easy to clean that up. Now I move over with that neutral gray, and I'm going to start picking out some of the edges on the armor. I'll do this a couple of different times with the ever brighter tones. And this hard edge highlight really just helps to define the model and add some much needed contrast to really pull everything out. So now I've switched over, the base coating is done. I'm going to apply a very thin coat of Army Painter Dark Tone Wash. This is their new Fanatic range line. This is mixed about 1-to-1 with water because I really want to thin it out. I don't so much want to tint the armor down as I want to fill in the crevices and the cracks and let it help me really pronounce all the details on the armor suit. You're going to slather this over the entire mini. Once you have that dried, you've actually got a fairly functional mini right here. You could paint your base black and put them on the table and start playing with a nice quality tabletop ready model. If that's all you want to do, you can stop watching right here, but I'm going to move on. I've gone to that light gold just to kind of pick out the very top halves of the visor pieces, just to add a little bit of a highlight there. Again, I know I messed the visor up, and when you see the final model, you'll see that I corrected that. There's a lot more visor on this dude than the classic Master Chief style Mjolnir armor. So now I'm working into my first highlight. You can see the orange on my palette. I've mixed that 1-to-1 with the red I used for the shoulder pads. We're going to focus on the upper portions of the red section on the shoulder pads and the tops of the knees. Now, this is the only highlight color I'll apply to the knees, but I'll take this up a step farther for the shoulder pads since they're at the top of the model and are getting more light on them. So now you can see here I'm going to take some more orange and mix into that red-orange mixture I already have because I want to lighten it up for a second stage of highlights. When you're applying the second stage, you want to just make sure that it is a smaller line of paint than you applied the first time. You still want your original highlight there. You just want this on your edges to really emphasize the edges of that armor. And I will not apply that to the knees because I don't want the knees overly highlighted as the models in a running pose are not getting much light. So now I've moved up to my light neutral gray. This is almost a white gray, and this is specifically for my hard edge highlights. I just want to use this on the upper portions of the exposed armor plates. This is anywhere where there's an armor connection, just so we can really pull out those details. And I know this is a little bright, but we're going to apply a second wash again after this stage so that we can kind of tone those highlights back and make sure that everything really got a nice fill of that thin wash the first time. Make sure that our details pronounce. When you're working on these hard edges like this, make sure that your paint is thin and use the side of your brush to ensure that you don't get a nice big blob somewhere on the model. Pro Acryl naturally is very thin. I'll still usually do a dollop of water off my brush when I'm working the paint just to get it a little extra thin. You know, when it's so runny, it just like floods the area when it comes off your brush, but you want it thin enough that you can work with it. See here, I've added some more water into my mix because it was just a little too thick for me to get what I wanted out of it, especially as I was getting down into these harder to reach areas. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of foam and a little bit of silver paint. I'm going to rip the edge of that foam off and I'm going to dab the paint in it, cleaning most of it off onto the brush here. What I'm going to use this foam for is to apply a light chipping effect to the armor. This is just going to add some nice random chunks and debris all over the place just to make it look a little more rugged. Now you can do this in multiple stages if you want, with different colored paints to really make the armor look like it's been chipped and beaten. Weathering is a preference. It's weathered as much as you want. If you think you've reached too far, you reach too far. If you haven't, hey, always do more. So now we're back to doing another stage of wash. Again, I've thinned this at least 1-to-1 with water, but this time I'm only targeting it on the gray and black areas. I really don't want to tone down that highlight on the shoulder pads, and I don't want to touch the visor any more than I have to. If you've got the brush control to get in there, there's some nice crevices inside the visor that you can re-accentuate, but it's not necessary. You really just want to focus on the area that you highlighted. It helps kind of pull everything together. after that wash is dried up, I've gone back to my original base tone gray, and I want to go in and just pick out some of the edged details on the bodysuit. Since we painted that in black, the wash doesn't really do much for it. The only way we're going to accentuate anything is with a highlight. And there are some nice details in that bodysuit. It's fun to bring those out. That done, I am using some texture paste, again from Pro Acryl, and I'm just going to go to town on the base. While you could just paint this black, that's fine. It would look fine on the game table. I want to just add a little texture and interest to the model's base. So I'm just going to slather this all over. And this does take a bit to dry, but if you're working on a full squad at once, this is one of those things you can let go for a bit to dry up. Once I've got that applied, I just wipe my thumb on the base here. I want to keep my base rim clean so that I can paint that black when everything's said and done. Now this texture paste is dry, I've taken some Drab brown and I'm going to apply a dry brush to it just to bring a little bit of an earth tone into it. Sometimes this goes on great, sometimes you end up like I do here with a little more of a stippling action just to kind of push some paint into the edges of it and add some color and life to it. While you're doing that dry brush, it's nice if you can hit the feet and the lower legs of the model. This will make it look a little more weathered and as if it's been operating in the environment that it's based on. You want to make sure that you have a pretty unloaded brush. You don't want to get too much on there. And you can see here I'm just stippling in some more of that brown just to get some tone and variation on that base. Go. He's looking almost done. So now, this is completely optional, of course. I am going to apply some Army Painter Tufts, a couple of different colors. I think I ended up putting 3 on the base total. I just put those into tweezers, and it's just the tiniest dollop of super glue just to ensure that it's going to stick down. They have a sticky back, and they will go down without the glue, but I'd rather be safe than have a tuft fall off in the middle of a game. Once you've set it down, just let go of it with your tweezers, and then use tips to make sure you press it down and flatten it out. So our Tufts applied, we're going to go ahead and make sure we paint the rim of that base. I prefer black, but if you wanted to get fun and creative, you could also do them in red or blue to match which squad you want them to be part of, or, you know, go your own route, have a green squad, whatever your preference is. Slow and steady, just so you don't spill over onto the top of your base. You're well into the home stretch now. This model is almost finished. Like I said, this was about an hour paint job, not counting drying time for the various layers of washes or the texture paste. But I think you're left with a pretty decent looking model. Now your Spartan squad's usually only 4 dudes, so you know, taking an hour or 2 to get a model done isn't a big deal in the long run, and it's nice to have a good looking squad when you hit the table and thump your friends. So, coming up here is our final reveal where you'll see I did in fact go back and fix that helmet, which bothered me as soon as I realized I had done it wrong. And that's our Spartan. I hope this video was helpful in some way. If you're not a regular painter, I hope you see it's not that hard to get a decent result to get these on the table. And if you're a far better painter than me, be gentle in the comment section. That said, please like and share the video with those you think will benefit from it, and I hope you enjoyed it.